When talking about pro-Union activity in the Deep South and the Civil War, oftentimes people focus only on partisans and bushwhacking, but in reality, especially with the case of Senator William Clayton Fane, I believe the Confederate government was responsible for a number of assassinations which they simply blamed on the partisans. Now, William Clayton Fane was a fascinating man. Hailing from Georgia, his grandfather and great-grandfather fought at the Battle of Kings Mountain. They were Over-Mountain men who showed up to fight the British and then moved deep inland within the heart of Appalachia, and it was this pride that inspired him to follow in his father's footsteps, becoming a master mason, a lawyer, and a senator. Now, when the Ordinance of Secession came down in 1861, rather than simply sit the Secession Convention out, as some people did, he arrived at the convention and spoke passionately about the need to remain in the Union and the beauty of America. He was a true patriot, and when the vote was decided in favor of secession, he was the only senator in the state of Georgia who flatly refused to sign the document, saying that to do so would be treason. And as the war began to end, he moved up to eastern Tennessee, which at that point was mostly occupied by Union troops. They'd been mostly pro-Union throughout the war, and he applied to the federal government for authorization to start recruiting local Unionists. And he sort of embedded with the Georgia Volunteers. They granted him the rank of colonel. It was at that time, the same day he was granted the rank of colonel, that he was assassinated by Captain John P. Gatewood. Now, what's so unusual about this is that John P. Gatewood was called the Red-Headed Devil of Georgia. He was a horrible man, and his gang was more serial killers than they were Confederate partisans. Confederate partisans had their moments of honor during the war, but Gatewood truly was just an awful person. He massacred refugees, he massacred women and children of Confederate soldiers who had simply left their posts to go visit their sick relatives, and if they crossed you and they just wanted your horse, they would kill you with a hammer. So for John P. Gatewood to assassinate Colonel Fane the day that he achieved his officer's commission, it tells me that somebody told him where Fane was going to be. After all, Fane was a senator, and it seems to me that the activities of the Red-Headed Devil of Georgia were mostly confined to killing women and children, and to assassinate a senator seems to be something that's a little bit too crazy for him to have pulled off. And he is buried here in a remote cemetery in eastern Tennessee in a place called Ducktown.
It's taken me forever to find the grave of William Clayton Fane, but it's here in Ducktown. After you cross the interstate, drive towards the Ocoee Rafting Building, which is right across the street from the Mallard Hotel, right before you get to this Burn Safe Tennessee sort of state building. It's right over here, and there is no way you would be able to see this unless you had some kind of knowledge about where it was. It's up in the clearing, right there. Very well guarded secret. And this is where we're at on the road, kind of right after the bend. I put quotations around Captain John P. Gatewood because the Confederates after the war made it very clear that they had never given him any orders. In fact, he seemed to make up his own orders, went along with them, and disobeyed Confederate orders whenever he was asked to do something. Gatewood was truly a psychopath, and again, I say there were other Confederate partisans who fought a legitimate war because there were Union partisans in the area that were committing atrocities as well, and these were just people that were defending their homes and striking out against people who were striking at them. It was very Wild West and very morally gray. But John P. Gatewood was kind of on his own. He just did what he did, and he was not somebody to look up to. And that's why he's been almost totally written out of the history books here in Georgia. And what's so fascinating is once the war was over, he simply disappeared to Texas. There's been some recording about what happened to him, but not much. He just kind of vanished and was never brought to justice for his crimes, including the Madden Branch Massacre, in which he lined up several people who were trying to flee to eastern Tennessee and just executed them. Colonel John S. Fane, the father of assassinated Senator William Fane and the son of Ebenezer Fane, the Patriot veteran of the Battle of Kings Mountain, is buried here in the family plot in Morganton, Georgia. And what's so interesting about this is that he took a lot of guidance from his father, who was a legislator and decided to take an active part in the community. I can't find his gravestone. I think it might have been moved in recent years, but there's old photos of it out there. He became a master mason and outlived his son. Very sadly, his son was assassinated, but after the war, he met at a convention in 1870 and agreed with other leaders of North Georgia that everybody ought to pardon the Confederate veterans who were not guilty of egregious crimes against humanity and work to achieve a more perfect union as quickly as possible. Ebenezer Fane was Senator Williams' link to the Revolutionary War and the man who inspired a patriotic spirit in the entire Fane family. His grandson almost certainly grew up listening to stories of his fight for the Union from their home in Fannin County on the Tennessee state border. Ebenezer was a very young man when he was struck in the leg by a Tory bullet at the Battle of Kings Mountain. His father, Nicholas, had brought Eb and his two other sons, John and Sam, to this battle. Nick is buried near Knoxville, while his son, Captain John, was killed near the former capital of the Cherokee at a place called Coda 1 year prior to his death. This was Ebenezer's brother, Captain John, and stories relate that 16 other militiamen were killed alongside him in an ambush. The Fane family doesn't appear on any official register of the Battle of Kings Mountain veterans, and the burial of several of them in northeast Tennessee indicates they were probably Over-Mountain men, those settlers who blazed a trail to the heart of Cherokee country and lived alongside them for years in the Watauga settlement prior to the first shots of the Revolution. Of course, after this, the remainder of the family moved to Fannin County, Georgia, where they again settled in the midst of the Native Americans, making a living settling America as early pioneers. These patriotic family values were passed down to Eb's son, John Fane, who took an active part in the community and instilled these ideas into his own son, William, who was later to be assassinated by the Confederacy.